It's time for Happy Hour with the Hombre. Hello and welcome to this edition of Happy Hour with the Hombre. Hopefully you've got some really nice tequila to sip on as you join us here for today's episode, which is going to be fantastic. I myself am sipping on my new budget brand that I did a video on that I really enjoy, Sangre Alteña Añejo. If you guys are sipping on something, please comment and let us know what you're sipping on today. Roscoe, good evening. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Okay, you guys, let me give you a little information about how this works. What we're going to do is I'm going to interview our guest today, and then about halfway through, we'll open it up for comments and questions. If you have a question, I ask that you put a Q in front of your question so I can identify the questions above the comments. We will also recognize some of the comments as well. If you'd like to support the channel and would like your comment or question to stick out, you'll notice there's a $ below the chat there in YouTube. You click on the $, it's called a super chat. It supports the channel with your donation, and it also will make your comment and question stick out and pinned to the top so people can actually see it longer. All right, so now that we've gotten through all of that information, it's time for me to welcome my guest. He's the owner of Tommy's Mexican restaurant in San Francisco, and he's also a good friend of mine, and he's also the inventor of the Tommy's Margarita, which is world famous margarita. Hello, Julio. How are you doing today?
Hi, Mark. Really well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Well, I just want to clear one thing up. I'm not the owner of Tommy's. My mom is the owner of Tommy's.
Okay.
I'm the beverage manager and an extremely loyal salaried employee.
Oh, okay. There we go. The beverage manager then. I know you're the tequila guy for Tommy's, I know. So I had some questions for you. I want to start off getting a little bit of information about Tommy's to start. I know it started in 1965, correct?
Yes. My parents started the restaurant in San Francisco in 1965. It certainly was not a tequila bar back then. In fact, we got our liquor license, I believe, in 1972. And in 1972, the bar at Tommy's probably looked like every other single bar in the United States. I mean, it had gin, vodka, whiskey, a lot of creme de cacao, creme de mint, creme de banana, a lot of interesting things that certainly today wouldn't fit the character of Tommy's, but that's the way the times were. We certainly were not specialists in tequila at all. We obviously sold tequila, but it was, I believe our house tequila when we started was Matador, a second label from Casa Cuervo. And we were trying to carve out some sort of niche. We didn't know what it was, though.
Okay, so how soon was it after you started that you just decided you wanted to build up the tequila collection at Tommy's and kind of focus and bring more tequilas in?
Well, what was really kind of interesting was, growing up in a family that had, for example, in this case, a restaurant, and we also had a small hotel in our town in the Yucatan. So as a young boy, honestly, I was prone to steal alcohol to try it, like many people. And being from the Yucatan, in the Yucatan in southern Mexico, the most common things to drink were lager style beers because of the heat and humidity. And then the distillates were rum and also brandy, because that was what was most available and, relatively speaking, inexpensive. So when I was in my teens, I was getting hammered on beer, rum, and brandy, and unfortunately finding out that those things kind of wreaked havoc on my head. And even though it was cool drinking, and getting drunk was fun. The hangover was horrible. And so, luckily, I eventually found at Tommy's, I was drinking a bottle of Three Generations, and that kind of started my journey. And that journey eventually led me to steal some Herradura Reposado. Changed my life. And fast forwarding to 1989, when a dear bartender friend, who was the best friend of our family attorney and worked at a bar in Berkeley called Palomino, asked me to come to his bar because he had just received 2 new tequilas. And those tequilas were Patron Añejo, made by Siete Leguas, and El Tesoro de Don Felipe Muy Añejo, made, of course, by the Don Felipe Camarena La Alteña. And when I drove my I think it was a 1979 Mazda GLC over to Berkeley and tried these things, well, then it was a new ball game. I fell in love and really wanted to find out what these products were all about.
Awesome. So how many tequilas does Tommy have now in stock at the restaurant?
Well, so we have about 325 different products for the general public, and we have about another 120 on our vintage list, which is the largest such vintage list in the world. But in order to get access to the vintage list, you have to be a graduate of my drinking club.
Very nice. Now, I'm kind of curious, once you started getting into tequila, I know you're really well known out in the distillery world out there in Jalisco and around Mexico. How did you get to be so known? How did you get to be so popular and get to know everybody and at all the distilleries? How did that come about?
Well, I was very lucky in that, like many people, I was mentored, and I think I really was so incredibly lucky to have been mentored by some of the most serious people in the business. So, for example, in the valleys of tequila, my mentors are Ingeniero Agustin Sanchez, who is actually now at Destiladora del Valle, which may not be a distillery of the greatest renown, but his ethics and his view and his desire to make great tequila is known. And also Mario Gomez, who was the founding master distiller at Regional, which arguably, in my opinion, when he was running it, was the best valley tequila in the world. Also people like Guillermo Romo de la Peña, the owner of Herradura, who sold it to Brown Forman with his brothers, and also Fernando González de Anda from Siete Leguas, Don Felipe Camarena, my father-in-law. I mean, some really serious people with great traditions. And it was those people that actually showed me that tequila was a very serious beverage, and in fact, a distillate that, yes, certainly held its own against other denomination of origin spirits. I mean, my notion had always been tequila's pretty crappy, and it's just to get really drunk and go crazy. And meeting people like the people I mentioned really helped me see a serious side of the business and appreciate true craftsmanship, and more importantly, dedication to the land. Because unlike many other products, without successful agave management, you don't have great tequila.
That's true. Yeah. And we're seeing we're seeing a problem with that right now with the shortage and with diffuser usage and stuff like that.
Hey, can I shout out to some people?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I have a couple of my old time graduates. Dean Tinney out there. Nice to see you, Dean. Chris S., thank you. Roscoe, thank you. Jennifer Kletzel, she is the Yo-Yo Ma of the West Coast. One of the most incredible cellists in the world is out there. Thank you for listening. Jaime Orendain, one of the partners at Tequila Arete, where I just was last week. Thank you so much for listening in. And thank you for the hospitality as always. And it's just really nice to see some people chatting in and listening.
There you go. All right. So, your restaurant's known for the margarita, the Tommy's Margarita. How did that come about? How did you decide you wanted to create that? And then how did the word get out about the margarita, and how did it kind of take off to be this world-renowned, famous margarita?
Well, it was interesting because Tommy's is located at 5929 Gary Boulevard on 24th Avenue. For I believe 40 was a great restaurant called Sombrero was at one point in the history of San Francisco the most popular and sought after restaurant to go to, because they were making Mexican food and making handmade tortillas, and they were making cocktails with fresh juice as well. And so one of the interesting things was when, obviously when we started making margaritas, we had no idea what we were doing. And so we were doing what everybody else was doing, right? So basically a classical recipe, right? So triple sec, tequila, and a little bit of lime juice, and sweet and sour and things of that nature. Well, as I learned more and more, really the tequila was started to become my focus. And meeting people like my godfather, David Grapschi, from that time from the Sazerac company, who represented Herradura, well, it became clear that the quality of the tequila was really vital to a phenomenally delicious margarita. We made great margaritas that were incredibly thirst quenching, refreshing, and bright. I mean, with fresh lime eventually. But the game changer was my idea to make a margarita that tasted of the tequila that one used. And Mark, I got to tell you, if I had worked in a corporate environment, I certainly would have been fired from my job, because I made a decision to swap out our house tequila from then, by this time it was Hero from Sauza, which I thought had a little bit of agave flavor. I mean, not a lot, but it certainly was decent vis-a-vis all the quote-unquote mixto well tequilas out there. And I changed it in favor of Herradura Blanco Suave, or Herradura Silver today at 40% ABV. And our pour cost went up something like $5 a liter to $19 a liter. And I only increased the price of our drink, I believe, like 50 cents. So my parents were going crazy, like, you are the worst business person in the history of business. You're going to, we're going to go broke. And unfortunately, our customers didn't catch on as quickly as I did. That's why I was saying, if I was in a corporate environment, I would have been fired, because it did not work at first. It did work eventually, and people then went on to taste the difference. And what I would do was, even with my regular guests, is make them an Herradura Silver margarita And this was blended, right? Blended. Then I would make them something else, like an Hornitos blended margarita, and you could still taste the difference with the crushed ice. It was fascinating. And it really led our customers and Tommy's to develop a nice culture of tequila appreciation through the cocktail, because still at that time, many people were very scared, to enjoy like a shot of tequila, right?
Well, I know that you have all kinds of educational things that go on at the restaurant as well. I know you have like a PhD program. You want to go into more details about what that's all about?
Well, so and honestly, I still didn't answer your question, which I will after this.
Okay.
But so what happened was we started carrying more and more 100% agave tequilas, and in fact, when I kind of started, I had built up our list to about 24 different things. Now, at that time in San Francisco, there was another restaurant called, oh man, it was run by John Sedler, who's a very famous Southwestern chef. The name escapes me, but he had like 20 tequilas on his list, and he got all the press because he was a big name. He's famous. I was in the middle of the avenues in the middle of nowhere. But even at that time, we had arguably the largest 100% agave tequila selection in the city of San Francisco. But the biggest problem was trying to get my guests to order brands of tequila that really no one had ever heard of and that had zero marketing budgets. And so what I did was I copied a program that was at a bar in Berkeley called Raleigh's, that was based around their beer around the world program. So I was a graduate of UC Berkeley, and so I would go to Raleigh's to, drink a beer, and they had this cool program where if you drank all their beer, they'd give you a hat or a shirt or something. Now, my problem was, being from the Yucatan, and not knowing a lot about beer, I just wanted to drink light lagers because that was what my palate at the time enjoyed, and that's what I was used to. So I could never really get their free swag because I didn't like drinking barley wines or stouts or other types of beer that didn't taste like ice cold water. So when it came time for me to develop our program at Tommy's, I took the basic template that Raleigh's had, which was making a big list, but I only required that our guests try half of the tequilas that we offered. Or actually, there were 24 of them. By this time, we now had almost 50 tequilas, mixtos and 100% agave tequilas. And again, the guest could drink anything that he or she wanted. And at the end of this period, if they drank, half of the selection or 24 things, I would give them a t-shirt and a little diploma that said they were a tequila master. I mean, it was a total gimmick. But what blew my mind was the individuals that after they got their t-shirt and diploma actually wanted to learn something. And I go, what do you mean you want to learn something? Well, we want to know more. And I'm like, what do you mean no more? Well, we want to know more. And that propelled me to start the other level of the club, which is the PhD club, and then get a little more serious with guests and show them, basic 101s about tequila, and eventually have those people almost become docents at the restaurant and teach the people next to them, or at least talk to them and say, hey, I'm drinking, El Tesoro. You ought to try it. It's great. And that again led to the building of a nice culture. But the way the Tommy's Margarita really blew up and got famous, because remember, I never, and no one in our family ever called our margarita the Tommy's Margarita. We simply called it the margarita that we sell at our restaurant that happens to be called Tommy's. Well, in 2001, I was very honored and privileged to be asked to travel with a group of tequila distillers to the United Kingdom and to France as they went with the president of Mexico at the time to sign agreements recognizing the denomination of origin status of tequila in the EU and the UK. And my responsibility was giving seminars to bartenders in London. And at that time, like still today, the best bartenders in the world, in my opinion, come from London. And it was just an amazing honor to try to share what very little I knew about tequila with these incredibly imaginative bartenders, you know, the likes of like Dre Masso, for example. People may not know Dre, but Dre is unbelievable. And anyway, bartenders were coming up to me and saying, well, I'd like to make a cocktail with XYZ reposado. How do you think it'll work with this kind of herb or this kind of spice? And they were questions that really were not being posed in America. I mean, in America, we made basically one cocktail with tequila, and that was a margarita. And everything else was a shot or something else. You know, the Paloma hadn't even gotten there, or Charro Negro, or Vampiro, or any of that, or Cantarito. And to hear a bartender, being a bartender myself, start asking me, well, you know, I want to use cilantro or basil. What kind of tequila would work with that? Just opened my mind as well. And eventually, about 2 years later, I would start hosting European bartenders and bringing them to San Francisco and bringing them to Jalisco. And it was Dre Masso and a gentleman named Henry Besant that I brought to Tommy's, that when they saw me doing what I did, said, oh, this is really cool. And they had their own consultancy companies, and they would go, you know, give consultancy to other bars in other continents and say, this is the Tommy's Margarita, right? So it wasn't my marketing genius at all. It was certainly theirs. And we are forever in debt to Dre Masso and Henry Besant for showing the world what a Tommy's Margarita is and was.
Wow, that's really cool. And I know now you guys market your own Tommy's mix for margaritas, where people want to make Tommy margaritas at home very easily. They can purchase your mix.
Sure, but the recipe, you know, one of the reasons of its great success is that the recipe for the Tommy's Margarita is so simple, right? It's just 2 parts, your favorite 100% agave tequila, 1 part fresh hand-squeezed seedless Persian lime juice, and then 1 part of agave fructose that's been cut 1-to-1. We were the first restaurant in the United States on a volume basis to introduce agave fructose as a cocktail. I did that about 30 years ago. And again, it was also groundbreaking to say that it was okay to use great cocktail. You know, in cooking, you know, the example I always use is the white Alba truffle. And white Alba truffle is obviously the most expensive truffle in the world, and it is really a life-changing ingredient. But we have to remember it's just one ingredient. And ingredients aren't linear in flavor. If you take one great ingredient and add another great ingredient, you don't have the flavors of 2 great ingredients. It's much more exponential. So when you slice white Alba truffle over simple egg noodles. I mean, it's a joy. It's not just the flavor of the truffle. And that's why no one eats a white Alba truffle like an apple, right? You need something to complement it with. And, you know, I know tequila's expensive, but if you want to make a good margarita, you need good tequila, right?
I found that out using your recipe. My people ask me, what do I mix with? My mixer is El Tesoro. I make my Tommy's margaritas with El Tesoro Blanco, and
God bless you. I'm drinking some Repo right now.
That's my well tequila, and it's a very good tequila, and it makes fantastic margaritas. And I use the Repo for my Palomos as well. Now,
Nice.
for the people that didn't know this, when he said agave fructose, it's agave nectar. So if you go to the store and you pick up agave nectar, that's what he's talking about when he talks about agave fructose. It's the sugar from the agave, the nectar.
Correct. But
Okay.
you know, back
Go ahead,
to the
go ahead.
margarita for 1 second. You know, for people who enjoy margaritas, and I know not everyone does, but if you do, contemplate this. Let's say you live in San Francisco like I do, where today, you know, because of the storm and the fog, it's pretty chilly. So I'd probably like a reposado or even añejo. I could have a little bit more length and a little bit more body and a little bit more mouthfeel. Whereas, you know, if I'm in Puerto Vallarta, where it's 100 degrees, I don't want that. I want a margarita that's much crisper, much brighter. So I'll probably make my margaritas there under those conditions with the beautiful bright blanco, right? So it can vary tremendously depending on the mood and the climate. And I'm obviously a big proponent of the Tommy's Margarita, and I think there's a Tommy's Margarita for every single occasion out there.
All right. So, and also, if you guys, Tommy's is such an iconic restaurant. And right now, of course, they're suffering because of the COVID-19 shutdowns here in California. They're not allowed to have in-house dining. I know you guys are doing takeout right now. But if you'd like to support Tommy's, you can do like I did and buy one of their t-shirts that they're offering right now. You can buy them online. I put the link in the description. This one's got G4 on the back. He's got a whole bunch of them with different really nice tequila companies logos on the back of them. And this helps support his crew there at Tommy's that currently aren't working because there's no work to be done, as well as he donates to bartenders associations to help other bartenders that aren't currently working because of COVID as well. So you want to talk a little bit about your t-shirts?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Mark. So, when COVID hit, I saw a lot of my contemporaries just asking for money, and I get it. I mean, it's brutal. I didn't want to do that because, if anything, that's the last ever resort. I mean, and that's the resort for me that just would mean we were in the most desperate times. We were trying to be a little proactive, so a little silkscreen shop. So I was able to put my to work at the same time. There wasn't enough work at the restaurant. So we put people to work making t-shirts. But then really I reached out to 6 tequila companies, and they were Espolón, Leza, G4, Tapatio, Tequileño, and Tapatio, Fortaleza, G4, Espolón, Tequileño, and and one more. And I don't know if I said Fortaleza, but anyway, I asked permission from these companies if they would allow me to use their intellectual property to allow us to sell t-shirts for our team. Oh, and Siete Leguas, I'm sorry. And I was really wonderfully surprised when all 6 of those companies said absolutely. It's a lot of trust to take someone's intellectual property and do something commercial with it that is in line with their own ethos, right? And we've been very supportive of the tequila industry, and it was really great that in our time of need, a lot of people in the tequila industry were willing to help us in that way. So yeah, if people, I know people do not need more fucking branded T-shirts, but if they like, we got some, and we've over the years done something that's kind of like T-shirt diplomacy for bartenders. A T-shirt, and for me personally, I find to be a really cool thing, and I love wearing the T-shirts that my friends give me from bars all over the world. And for me, having the little silkscreen shop and making shirts and giving them out all over the world was just a way for me to spread some marketing love of Tommy's. And then I found out that people really dug them. So that was pretty cool. And so we've seen T-shirts, that end up in thrift stores, that end up in the middle of nowhere in Africa. Everywhere. So just grateful for that.
Well, I bought all of them, so I've got them all in my closet, and I love them, so I wear them all the time.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to take some time to, Julio, watch your screen. I'm going to put some comments and questions up for you. So first we have Jaime Orendain. Of course he's drinking Arete Artesanal Suave Blanco, right? You wouldn't expect that from anybody else but Jaime Orendain.
Well, nice. Well, I love Arete Gran Clase Añejo.
The Gran Clase is very good too.
Oh man, it's money.
I have the extra Añejo too, which is really good. Yeah. And then Jennifer says, "Yay, Julio!"
Well, I was at Arete last week, so today is technically my first day out in the wild after quarantining for 10 days. I was in Jalisco, and we've been visiting distilleries in hopes of writing a reference book about every single distillery, and we got hosted beautifully by Jaime and Eduardo.
Oh, nice.
So a big shout out to them and to Arete.
Very nice. And don't forget, guys, if you click the $sign below the chat, you can also do a super chat where your question or comment will get pinned to the top, and it also helps to support the channel here for all the stuff that I do here on the channel, as well as for the Agave Collective that I also do. Roscoe says, "Hi, Julio."
Hi. And we got Vivian Pay all the way in Singapore on the chat.
Yeah, I'll pop them up on the screen. Don't get ahead of me. Oh, we got Dean who says, Julio is one of my favorite human beings. All right, Dean.
Oh, that's very, very kind.
There you go. Hello, my friend. He says, Jaime again commented. Dean says, good to see you, my friend. Michael Fairweather is in Singapore, and he says it's 9 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, so he's having a little Julio with his coffee. How you doing, Michael? It's good that you can join us today. Vivian says, hola, Julio from Singapore as well. A couple Singapore people. Dean says, go Bears.
Oh, nice. Nice. Cal alum, so.
There you go. Mike Callahan says, greetings from San Diego, California, which he's up here with us, and we're getting ready to brace for a big rainstorm that's coming in. How's everyone doing tonight? We're doing great. Here you go, having a little Julio with their coffee and tequila.
So I got to tell you, I picked up these glasses at El Búho about 10 days ago.
In Tlaquepaque?
Yeah, in Tlaquepaque. Really beautiful.
Nice. Those are really nice. Okay, we have something in Spanish. De Hacienda Vieja Tequila. There you go. Hector Calzada.
Oh, yeah. You bet. Saludos a todos en La Hacienda Vieja.
So remember, dial 211 for your margarita emergencies. 2-part agave. There you go.
No, Jeff, I think that's Jeff Briss.
That's Jeff Briss. That is, yes.
Jeff Briss also has coined a very cool phrase for our tequila world by calling our vintage selections products that are unobtainium.
Unobtainium. There you go. I know Bill Bumgardner uses unobtainium as well.
Yep.
Tommy's is the best margarita mix. I agree. It is the best. Ever since I started drinking Tommy's margaritas, I can't go back to putting any orange liqueur or anything like that in my margaritas.
Well, you know, it's interesting because, and not to say anything disparaging about the wonderful orange liqueurs that exist from France or Italy or anywhere. You know, again, the goal of the Tommy's margarita is to make sure that the tequila shines. So great as those orange liqueurs are, they kind of overpower the tequila. And tequila, as you know, Mark, has very delicate and intricate flavors.
Oh, yeah.
You don't need to add that other stuff. If you add agave, which complements it very well, you can let those flavors shine through. And, you know, I was once at a liquor convention in San Francisco at a location called the Old Regency Theater. And it was one of my first ever liquor conventions or trade shows. And I had my little name tag on, and it said Julio from Tommy's Mexican Restaurant. And I'm walking around this one particular room where there was a very fancy orange French liqueur. And so the gentleman from their booth looked at my badge and said, hey, you, Julio. And I go, oh, yes, excuse me. And he goes, hey, do you guys make margaritas over there at Tommy's Mexican Restaurant? And I said, yes, we do. And he goes, well, if you use our product, you could use the cheapest tequila you can buy, and your margarita will taste of our product. And I immediately responded and said, well, that's great, but we want our margaritas to taste of tequila. And the guy just had no answer. He had no clue. He was completely dumbfounded by the fact that there was an individual that wanted a margarita to taste like tequila.
Well, there's one saying in sales. Yeah, I've worked in sales for most of my life, and it's know your customer, right?
Absolutely.
And in this case, he didn't know his customer, and he was
correct.
Throwing something at you that shut you down and turned you off more than got you interested in it. All right, so I hope Julio's mom and dad don't own the rights to the Tommy's mix. Do you own the rights to the mix?
Well, so I actually sold about 98% of the company to some friends of mine. So I still represent it and still drink it, and we still sell it. But I took that money as seed money for a distillery I've been trying to build for about 10 years.
Nice.
But I mean, I love the Tommy's mix, and it's run by John Meyer, who's a dear friend and all around great guy. So,
well, Dean says he loves how simple Blanco speaks to him. I love that too. I was never much of a Blanco fan when I first started. I was all into añejos and extra añejos, and then when I started exploring the Blancos more, they really do have an incredible flavor profile, and there's really intricate flavors mixed in there, which I really grown to appreciate.
Yeah, I completely agree, Mark. And I had the similar experience because, again, in the late 80s, when we started to have the golden age of tequila, you know, there was a big mistake done by the importers of tequila, and that was importing Blanco and Añejo without reposado and having the wholesale prices be negligible. So when I was growing up or starting to run the bar at Tommy's, for $1 more, I could buy El Tesoro Muy Añejo. Why would I buy El Tesoro Plata?
Yeah.
You know? And so it took me like a while to come back around and go, whoa, there's some great Blancos as well, you know? And then for the category itself, it became a little bit of a problem because Reposado didn't have a space in the pricing structure, you know?
Yeah.
But back then, Tommy's certainly bought easily 10 times more añejo than Blanco, with the exception of our well. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah, very fascinating. Very fascinating.
So 332 Nokoyo says, what does it mean to have a agave nectar cut 1-to-1?
Okay, so we're trying to make a simple syrup out of agave. So one of the problems that I've seen worldwide is when you buy agave nectar or fructose, it's extremely viscous because the Brix level is extremely high and it'll never ferment. So when you put it, say, on a bar spoon and add it to a cocktail, well, it takes a long time to do that. It's slow pouring. It's, again, so viscous that I don't think the bartender gets all the use out of the agave that he or she can.
I think some of it sinks to the bottom or the glass, right?
Or stays on the spoon, right? So by cutting it 1-to-1 with purified water, you do lower the Brix and it can become fermentable, but you can now pour it with much more precision and also give your cocktail a little bit more volume, right? Because there's been a little bit more dilution, and you'll save yourself some money. And that was another kind of factor in using agave. You know, as great as some of these, you know, French orange pours are, they cost more than the tequila, or used to. And you can actually save money, even though agave fructose, you know, used to be 20 times more expensive than, say, cane sugar. It was still cheaper than, say, a French liqueur. Right? So it made more economical sense, in my opinion, for the venue to spend money on a better tequila than to buy fancy triple sec.
Well, your photographer says cheers, Michelle.
Oh, great shout out to her. Thank you for the reminding me to put on a collared shirt.
Bill Baumgartner says he's enjoying his Tapatio Añejo right now.
Oh my God, Bill, I wish I was there with you.
Hey, Dana, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it. So what extra añejo is your absolute favorite if you're stranded on an island?
Okay, so my perspective is different because I've been so blessed to be drinking tequila for about more than 30 years. So if I only had one extra añejo, I would probably say Chinaco Black Label, right? But at like $5,000 a pop, you know, it's not that practical. So more so today, I mean, and again, it'd be Tapatio Excelencia. I do have to say that I am often sometimes criticized for being such a proponent of Tapatio and El Tesoro, because people think that just because I married one of the daughters, that I would automatically just say that their products are great. And anybody who actually knows me knows that I'm on record over 30 years talking about the quality of Tapatio and El Tesoro, among others. And so it was literally decades before I married my wife that I've been espousing, you know, the excellence that goes on at La Alteña.
All right, so Bigal 32238 wants to know if you have Don Felix expressions in your list for making margaritas. I know I do love the Don Felix line.
Of course we do. Yeah, so Mark, let me tell you a little bit, if you don't mind, about selection at Tommy's. And it may be a little controversial, but we now focus on distillery owned and operated. And it's not to say, I mean, I am by no means a communist. I am by no means against people pursuing their agave dreams. But looking at the category from my perspective over many decades, I've seen that there's never been in the history of a contracted tequila that stayed with the same original producer, right? And as someone who used to sell everything by hand and by smell, so for example, Tommy's has never been a place where you just go in there and you pick things. People want to learn, and the only way I know of teaching someone about something that they've never had is to either smell it or give them a little sample, right? I mean, that's the ultimate way of finding out whether or not someone likes something or not. And I remember one very specific time when it was a very rainy Friday night, and the restaurant was dead because of the weather. And this gentleman asked me to pour him a 2-ounce pour of Porfirio Añejo. And so, I took his order. I go to the bar, pour him, 2 ounces of Porfirio Añejo in a nice glass, and I took it to his table. And about a minute later, he called me back, and he goes, "This is not what I ordered." And I go, "Oh, excuse me?" And he goes, "I ordered Porfirio Añejo, and this is not Porfirio Añejo." Okay, so I'm in a very awkward situation because I went back to the bar, grabbed the bottle of Porfirio Añejo, and showed him, "Sir, this is where I just poured your shot from." And he goes, "Well, that's not Porfirio Añejo." And I'm like, okay, I didn't know what to do. I mean, I'm not going to fight with this guy, but this guy's insane, in my opinion. And so what I did was I go, "Okay, sir, do you mind if I go upstairs? I'm going to get a brand new sealed bottle of Porfirio, and I will open it up in front of you and pour it for you." So I went upstairs, grabbed another bottle, opened it and poured it to him in a glass at the table. It was the same as I poured him before. And he goes, "Well, this is not the Porfirio Añejo I know." And I'm like, "Sir, I have no explanation for you. I don't know I'm dumbfounded." Well, I would eventually obviously go on to learn that Porfirio was a contracted product and that had been made at many distilleries. And
it has a storied history, Porfirio does.
and obviously the Porfirio that my guest had enjoyed was a different version of the Porfirio that I had just gotten from Todd Hunter, from the importer at that time. And what it taught me was, contracted products are tough because relationships break down all the time in tequila, whether it's because of price of agave, whether it's jealousy, whether it's supply problems, whether it's, someone gets a better offer. Something always happens. And I didn't have, as my career went on, I honestly lost patience trying to hand sell products that changed every year and a half, because, I don't look at the business on a year-to-year basis. I look at it 10 years at a time. And even, unlike many restaurants, we never swapped out our well tequila because something was 5 cents cheaper, right? We went with people we believe in and trust, and that, in our opinion, have well-made products regardless of price. So when I started, Herradura Blanco Suave was my well for over 20 years, right? And then there was a little bit of an intermission, and then we went to Arete for another fabulous 11 years. Um, you know,
Of course, Jaime has to plug his Grand Clase Extra Añejo.
oh no, delicious, delicious. But it's a different mentality because I mean, obviously, we're a business and we're there to try to make money and sell things. But I've always been really concerned with trying to point the guest in the right direction. So, you know, what always fascinated me in service was how a stranger could go to a particular bar or restaurant and ask another stranger, his or her server, excuse me, what do you recommend? And that server would just blindly say, I recommend you drink, you know, Arete or El Tesoro or whatever, without knowing anything about the guest asking the question. And oftentimes at Tommy's, a guest would come in and say, oh, I'd like a tequila. And it'd be 20 minutes before he or she got served because we had a genuine interest in trying to sell them something that they hopefully would appreciate based on their comments. Not just you come on in and I sell you the thing I'm making the most money on, or the thing that I got a deal on, or the thing that particular company is promoting that night. You know, it very different. It's a very different mindset. I mean, we hope to be in business forever, and we prescribe to a very great adage of or saying by Patricia Fripp that says, we don't just want to close a sale, we want to build a relationship.
And I heard you're like the best. I mean, that's what everybody always says. You know, you're the kind of person that when you walk in, you could be 3 to 5 years since you've seen somebody and you're like, oh, hey, so-and-so, you like Fortaleza Reposado. Come on, sit down, have a glass. I remember you, blah, blah, blah. Which, I mean, that really makes people feel at home, and it really makes people feel comfortable. And that explains to me why, as you can see, you've got so many friends.
Oh, it's very, very kind. Well,
all right. So Bill wants to know, what are some of the new tequilas and distilleries we should be aware of as consumers that want to focus on owner-operated products?
Well, so you pointed out a nice one. Sangre Alteña is an incredible family by Tepatitlan. I visited the distillery, and I've met with them several times. They're really cool people. They're growers, and their tequila is delicious. You know, in the valley, you know, Familia Landeros making Atanasio is awesome. Obviously, you know, I have a saying that, you know, the people doing good work in tequila today are still the people that were doing good work in tequila 10, 20, and 30 years ago. So, I mean, Siete Leguas, you know, Tapatio, Fortaleza,
Carlos Camarena, Outlaw Alteña.
I mean, Felipe Camarena, G4.
Yeah.
You know, I people take a lot of shots at Patron. I think Patron is very well made. You know, they make business decisions to suit their company and needs. They distill very well, and they use great.
They also market very well, and that's what really sets them apart. Really,
well, you bet.
They're very good at marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would encourage people to try to stick with tequilas that are made in a natural way. I know it's more confusing than ever, but you can certainly, in my opinion, discern additive-free tequilas, and certainly discern, with a little bit of training, diffuser tequila. You know, it's getting more and more difficult because, you know, when I started, you know, we could count on every generation of agave there being a glut or a shortage. And depending on the cycle, you would see either brands disappear because agave got too expensive, or brands proliferate because agave was really reasonable. And then in, say, like the 90s, the industry started trying to maximize the volume of product. So people were making a lot of tequila, but in order to make it drinkable, would oxygenate the daylights out of it, right? Or let it sit to make it more pleasant, as opposed to maybe cutting a larger portion of the head and tail from the distillate to make it really outstanding. Now, that eventually would evolve today, where I think the industry has a little bit of an issue where now it's very difficult for consumers to tell on just the nose alone, because people will add flavors to diffuser made tequila to make it smell palatable, right? And that's where reputation comes in. You know, the people that have been making great tequila for a long time do not need anyone to certify them in any way except what the CRT does to tell them that they make great tequila. I mean, you know, you don't have to tell Felipe Camarena he makes good tequila. He knows it. Why? Because he uses sound principles, and he starts off with solid agave, right?
Yeah, traditional methods.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I think the consumer has to ask a couple more questions, like, you know, what kind of stills are used, what kind of ovens are used. And that'll generally tell you a lot. You walk into a column mill, or it's all, I mean, you know, you see really young agave. I mean, you know, it's not a secret. People aren't really hiding things. They're trying to hide them in flavor profile, but on the production side, you can't really hide it. So I would encourage distillery owned and operated, for the sole reason that if you own the brand and you own the distillery, you still may not make great tequila.
It'll remain consistent.
But you're going to try to make great tequila.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know how much your listeners know, but when people contract, it's genuinely rare that the contractor will make a different product. The easiest way to distinguish a contract from a product made by the owner is with the flavoring, right? Or an additive, right? You know, unless you're doing an incredible amount of volume to justify a distillery changing a recipe, but that's extremely rare. And also remember, something like fermentation, you would never, unless you're crazy, want someone who is a stranger introducing a different yeast strain into your facility if you have a well-regarded flavor profile already, right?
Yeah, but you know, there's some exceptions to the rule. You know, I think generally, you know, you're correct. I do believe there's some exceptions to the rules, like Vivanco and Associates and Sergio Cruz there. He does some fantastic work, and they do like Gran Dovejo out of there, which is a contract distillate, which is, I believe, is very good, and it's very consistent. And you can try the Viva Mexico is very different too, but it all has to do when you talk to Sergio about how long they cook the agave, whether they have hornos available, they have autoclaves available, and there's things like, so there, I think there is some exceptions, but generally I agree with you that, you know, most of the time for like the big ones like Cofradia and stuff like that, they make the same stuff and they just change the flavor profile using additives and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different business model. I mean, Carlos Hernandez at Cofradia is extremely successful, and it's amazing. He is a large producer and no one really knows his brands, and he really has very little interest in selling his brand anywhere because his contracts, you know, not only pay the bills, but provide him with a nice, happy life, right?
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you think about it, when you make a product that people put in their bodies, it's the most privileged thing in the world, right? And I've always thought that if I ever were to make tequila, I would try to hopefully make the best product I can make, right? Because when someone puts that in their body, they are entrusting you to a degree that is really unbelievable.
Yeah, we don't want a headache as well.
That as well, right? That as well.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So we have another question for you. What is the brand of agave syrup at Tommy's? What is your house brand?
So we don't buy agave like the general public, right? I buy 55-gallon drums, right? So I could, so the agave retail world is a co-packer that buys drums or totes from any of the producers in Mexico and then co-packs them. So we don't do that. But that being said, I mean, Costco sells great agave, Whole Foods does. I mean, it's really amazing that you can actually find the product in almost every corner of the Western world.
By the way, I talked to Senior Magway today, and they said that your sample is coming, and they ordered it, and it should be there next week, as well as the Sotol, the samples that I.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to that.
He said you've tried the agave nectar before.
Is it? Wait, you said it's from Durango or Michoacan?
Yeah, Alejandro. He said he sat in your bar and talked to you. Like about 6 weeks ago or so.
No, not 6 weeks ago because we were closed.
No, well, he said it was just recently, maybe 6 months ago.
Okay, 6 months ago. God, I don't remember, but
yeah, he said you tried some of it. You said it was really good, but it is on the pricey side, so it might be a little more expensive than what you'd want to buy for cocktails there at Tommy's.
Well, no, we certainly. I am looking for a new supplier, and in this new journey of me writing a book, I'm also going to visit a bunch of agave fructose producers, not only in Jalisco, but in Michoacan as well. And
I was blown away by this stuff when I tried it. I mean, I have like probably 6 or 7 different ones in my pantry, but I was blown away by it. So it's really, really good. So when you try it, PM me and let me know what you think, okay?
Oh, absolutely.
So B-Bomb says, Julio and Tommy's is the master of hospitality. I walked in 1996. Julio introduced himself and asked for my preference, spicy, fruity. And then he poured an El Tesoro Reposado shot. I tasted it. It was fantastic. Didn't go back for a year. 2 snaps of his finger. Julio recognized me and poured a new product that was mind-blowing. There you go.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I always hear stories like that about you.
Are there any questions out there?
Yeah, we're working on that. Let me see. What brand did he say? The new one? I think that you have to look out for.
Well, I'd be drinking Sangre Alteño. I'd be drinking Atanasio from the Valley.
Yeah, well, Sangre Alteño isn't a new one. It was one that I found in Mexico, and it was primarily only available in Mexico. And
they've been around for over 10 years.
Yeah, they've been around for a long time. And in Mexico, I bought it for like $12 to $13 a bottle.
That's expensive.
For the Añejo?
Oh, yeah. No, I remember when I started buying Sangre Alteño, it was $7 when everything else was like $15.
Yeah. And with that one, I did some detective work.
They had a lot of agave.
And I found the importer, and then Julio messaged me and said, hey, by the way, if you get in touch with the importer, let me know because I want to get some for Tommy's. And so I got in touch with the importer and was able to arrange for them to arrange it for purchase with a retailer where we got pretty good pricing on it for a Blanco, a Repo, and a Añejo. It's not as good as your pricing, Julio, but I also connected Julio with the importer, and I was told that a sizable order was placed.
And I got to tell you, I would buy it because as soon as COVID's over, I'm going to buy it all. So
Yeah, you said you were going to place a sizable order. So I told him, I said, make sure you put a case aside for me just in case Julio comes in and tries to buy it all.
yeah, no, I'm kind of famous, Mark, for, I mean, I'm a big tequila hoarder, and also, having the relationships I have with most of the distilleries, um, we are very privileged to know what's coming down the pipeline. So when you said the other day on your podcast that, the Sangralteña is from 7 or 8 years ago, I mean, it's really well made and delicious, and made with ripe agave. You cannot ask
it's
for
06.
more.
It's 14. It's an 06 bottle.
Yeah,
So this is
crazy.
Yeah, I
Fucking
told people
crazy.
that in the group, and so we actually, when I last talked to the importer, they said we sold over 100 bottles of it, which is great.
That's
So
awesome.
some people are going to get some really great tequila, and I have a lot of people that are saying, "What do you mean this is going to be better than Altos or Espolon?" And I'm like, "Trust me."
Oh yeah, mind blowing. So on your chat group, I'm really surprised there's no one that has had any vintage regional out there except for like Tommy's customers, because vintage regional is such a treat.
Well, I might have to come visit you and try some. So,
Please.
I still haven't tried the vintage Herradura yet, which I so badly want to try the pre-diffuser Herradura because I've heard so many good things about it. But
Yeah, life changing.
yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yep.
All right, so thank you, sir. I'm learning so much in this interview, Julio. I appreciate the show. Thank you, Abigail. I appreciate you for watching. What is the relationship between Tommy's and Don Javier's La Capilla? I've seen the Tommy's logo in their wonderful bar and another awesome bar in Arandas.
So, Don Javier, I was introduced to Don Javier in the very early 90s by Ingeniero Agustin Sanchez, who at that time was the master distiller at Viuda de Romero. And, Don Javier, when I met him, obviously I was one of many patrons and no one in particular, but his hospitality blew me away, and that he was running a place that was like the Cheers of tequila, and he was just kind and gracious, and almost the last thing on his mind was selling someone a drink. The first thing on his mind was making sure people were okay and having a nice time. And I tried to model my hospitality after his. And we developed a really beautiful friendship over the next 25 years. And, we would throw his birthday party for him. We would take him out. I mean, he was at my wedding. But in the last years, 2 years ago, Don Javier was already sick. He could barely walk. He was going blind in one eye. He was losing his hearing. And with the, I would take all the foreign guests that I took to Tequila had to have a mandatory visit to see Don Javier make his classic cocktail,
Batanga.
the Batanga.
Yeah.
And so, by exposing Don Javier to more people, Don Javier's La Capilla even made the top 50 bar list in the world several times. And it was a true tribute to him and his hospitality. And 2 years ago, I had an idea to have a fundraiser for him in London during London Cocktail Week and Top 50. And we were able to raise some money through the sale of t-shirts and auctioning off old tequila bottles. And we were able to get money. Well, we wanted to get him a new hearing aid, but that wasn't possible. We wanted to get him a cataract operation, but we were told it was too risky. But we just wanted to try to make his last years easier. And unfortunately, he passed away last year, and we really couldn't do as much as we wanted for him. But the money that was left over, we started looking after his sister, who was his caregiver. And unfortunately, she passed away yesterday.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so Senora Marta passed away. A real bummer. But, Don Javier, people would go to his bar that didn't even drink alcohol. They would go there to receive his blessing. And then every Christmas, he would give away roasted chickens and blankets to poor people. And I remember one year, I go, Don Javier, I want to help you. Why don't I give you t-shirts to sell to foreigners, and then you take that profit and buy chickens or blankets? And so I made these t-shirts that said, I heart Don Javier, and it ain't the Batangas talking. And so I gave him, I don't know, like a couple hundred t-shirts. And I went back to La Capilla like 2 months later to see how it had gone. And he didn't sell one single t-shirt. He kept them in the box. And I go, Don Javier, what happened? Why aren't you selling these things? And he had been personally offended by my saying that said, I love Don Javier. And he told me another man can't love another man. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it that way. I meant it, as a human being thing, a humanity thing. And what he did then was he got all my t-shirts and he printed under his name La Capilla. So he was more comfortable saying, I love La Capilla. And then he was able to sell them and raise a little bit of money. But he was just the most generous, humble, gracious human being I've ever met. And by the way, that is the only bar in the entire world I've ever been kicked out of. And I wasn't even drunk, and nor had I even had a drink yet. I walked in once with a very dear friend named Reza Naima. We walked in and he had some guests that didn't like what we looked like or didn't like us. And Don Javier, seeing that there was tension, came up to me and he said, do you mind if I ask you to leave and come back on another time? And so I did, right? I mean, he recognized the tense situation and he immediately, solved it, and we respected his wishes and we left. But
yeah, I still salute to him when I stir my batanga with the knife that I cut the lime with.
That
say
is so
salute
awesome.
Don Javier.
Well, I hope anyone who had the privilege of having a cocktail in his presence feels the same way, because he was a great man.
Yeah. All right, I think this is a question for me. I noticed several Tequila Hombre's preferred brands use a roller mill versus a Tahona stone. Is there a noticeable... there's only like a handful of distilleries that still use Tahona wheels. So yeah, there's some of my preferred brands that are roller mill, which is perfectly fine. I don't find that roller mills make bad tequila at all. It's just an extraction method, and there are some good ones that use roller mills.
All right,
it's Julio. Here you go. Any plans for a second location in like San Diego?
No, the restaurant, I'll say that the restaurant business is the last form of legalized slavery. It's a lot of work. My dream is this. We've been building a distillery for 10 years. We'd love to finish this year. I know it's very ambitious, but that's what I'd like to do.
I know there was somebody that asked if you're looking for investors in your distillery a little earlier.
No, we're not looking, so I had interesting partnership once, and I kind of vowed to not really start businesses with partners again, though I just started another one. But with this, my partner is my wife, Lily, and we hopefully one day dream of making tequila the way her father and grandfather made tequila.
So by the way, how is Lily doing? Is she feeling better?
Yeah, so my wife is having a tough time. She got shingles, which suck, and then she got COVID. And you know what's fascinating is she is the person that took 55 hours of COVID training, and she is vigilant in washing hands and maintaining distance, and yet she still got it. And she doesn't go out at all, or very, very little. So, I mean, COVID is a very serious thing. I also got COVID about 3 months ago. And luckily my symptoms were mild, but it is a very serious thing. And as much as we all want to go out and party, we got to take care of ourselves and not expose anyone else to it, especially our elder generation. So my mother-in-law, who lives with my wife, she went to Guadalajara just to be safe. But thank you for asking. And I mean, I spoke to her right before the call, and she said she was starting to taste a little bit.
Oh, good.
So that's great news.
Good, yeah.
Yep.
So Daniel, just so you know, it's justified just to take the trip up there, just to see Julio and Tommy's. And if you haven't been to the city of San Francisco before, it's a beautiful city. There's lots to do. It's just now is not the best time to do it. But it's definitely worth it. And Julio, if you do open up a restaurant down here in Southern California, I do hope that you put a cigar lounge next to it.
Oh,
and
man.
That you and I can sit down and have some good cigars and talk and have some good tequila together.
Well, Mark, I think that's another episode because I'm a little bit of a Cuban cigar expert.
Yes.
And I certainly have my opinions and preferences.
Well, when Cuba's all done and we can plan a trip, I would love for you to take me on a tour of Cuba, and we can just smoke our way from one end of Cuba to the other, enjoying some really good Cuban cigars.
You may not want to come back.
Yeah. Well, my wife would force me to come back, so I don't think that would be an option.
Yeah, I'm with you. Does your wife enjoy you smoking?
No, she doesn't.
Yeah, likewise mine. I took Lily to Cuba before we were married, just for her to meet my friends and see why I'm so passionate about Cuba and what they do there. And she hates cigar smoke. And
well, she's not watching, so I can do this. When I come in the house from smoking a cigar, it's like this.
You stink. Go take a shower.
I know the feeling. I always, actually, when I go smoking, I always have my toothbrush and toothpaste in my backpack. So as soon as I finish, got to brush my teeth 5 times.
All right, I guess Hector Calzada said, do you have to mention his hand-cut cheese? I guess he's talking about Don Javier again.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
He says you have to mention his hand-cut cheese.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was, again, the hospitality at La Capilla was so incredible. Every Monday, during up until maybe, say, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a group of business people in Tequila that were called capilleros, and they would always get together and have a lunch at La Capilla. And if you happen to go there, you were welcome. Or on most days, Don Javier would put out the peanuts for you, put out some fresh cheese for you. I mean, really above and beyond. Just wonderful. Wonderful.
Well, Jaime says he's on the final end of COVID. Well, we wish you speedy recovery, Jaime. And hey, when are you and Eduardo going to come on and interview here on the episode of Tequila Hombre? I'm a huge Arete fan, so I hope to see you guys agree to come on sometime. That would be awesome.
You definitely have to have the brothers on.
I would love that. I would love that. And even the son. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
I know. I see the son on all the time. As a matter of fact, he was the one that arranged for my tour of Arete last time I was in Tequila, and I loved it. It was great.
Hey, Mark, we got to ask Jaime about, apparently there are a couple of American girls running the Arete bar on the weekends. I mean, when I drove by there 2 weeks ago, it was like a COVID super spreader event. It was packed.
Let's see if he comments about that. Last time I was there, it was closed, and I was there with Francisco from Better Call Pancho, and he was the one that actually was tending bar. He's not nearly as nice as a couple of girls, I guess, would be. So, but he was cool. We had Sancho and I had a good time, or Pancho and I had a good time.
Very nice.
So Jim Brady says, "Hola."
Oh, Jim Brady out in New York.
Yes. Jaime says, "You tell as." I don't know what that means.
Yeah, neither do I.
All right, well, I think that does it for our comments and questions. Julio, thank you so much for taking the time to come out and join us today for this episode of Happy Hour with the Hombre.
Bless you, Mark. Thank you so much, and thanks for everyone for listening. And I hope everyone survives the pandemic and we can all get vaccinated and get back to enjoying tequila with our friends and family. And come on out, and if you're in San Francisco, please come by and say hello.
Yes, please do. Don't forget, we do have the happy hour with the Q&A with the Hombre on Mondays. We have happy hour with the Hombre on Wednesdays. Although everybody's saying thank you, Julio, just so you can see here.
Thank you. Salute to everybody out there.
Wash your hands, wear a mask.
Yep, indeed.
All right, thank you so much, Julio. I appreciate it. Thanks everybody.
Mark, anytime.
We'll see you next time. Salud.
Look forward to it. Salud. Thank you, guys.